welcome. We're going to begin now, and our program's about fostering resilience through mindfulness. And right away, as a way to begin our program, I want us to experience some mindfulness. So we're going to do a practice that's really just a mindful check-in. And if you've never practiced mindfulness before, don't worry, I will guide you through this, but we are probably coming from different aspects of our day. Maybe we've had a long day, maybe we've been engaged in a lot of activities. So this is just a practice to help us fully arrive here and become receptive to what we'll be learning tonight. So to begin our practice, if you like, you can close your eyes. If that's not comfortable for you, you always have the option of keeping your eyes open and just holding them in a soft gaze at a point in front of you. And I'll also invite you just to find a posture that supports your alert yet relaxed attention. So that might mean your spine is just a little straighter. And yet we can have some ease in this posture by allowing our hands to be held softly in our laps. And if you like, if it feels natural, you can take a full breath in and really connect to the sensation of the breath moving through the body. And in particular, connect with that visceral sensation of the breath letting go. And I'll invite you just to connect with your body sitting in the chair. So feeling the weight of the body in the chair. You might also be aware of the temperature of the air moving around you, maybe the contact of the warmth or the coolness of the air on your face. You might notice the touch of your sleeve against your arm. And as you settle into your body, you might also become more aware of the breath moving through the body. So just allow your attention to notice that, to gravitate toward it and feel the breath, either in the abdomen, the chest, or at the tip of the nose. You can also become aware of what you might be thinking, thoughts either appearing as images or mental chatter. And just notice the quality of your mind. Are your thoughts racing or are they slowing down? Maybe you don't have that many thoughts. And you also might notice some emotion moving through the body, maybe just a hint of that. And if you're not aware of any emotion, you can enjoy the peaceful absence of emotion in the body. So we're mindfully checking in to how we are in this moment, how we feel physically, mentally, and emotionally. Wonderful. So when you're ready, you can open your eyes. And I'm curious, what did you notice as you did that? Maybe you noticed that there was a bit of a settling. Maybe you noticed that you had some tension in the body or that your mind was busy. All of that is good. It's part of being mindful. So what did you notice?
I at least feel more relaxed.
Yeah, so maybe a bit of a settling down. And we can notice everything when we're mindful because awareness doesn't discriminate. It is open to the range of things that we feel, that we think, that we sense in the body. And one of the advantages of becoming more aware is that it cultivates this responsiveness and this resiliency. And that's what we're really going to be exploring today. And Karen just sharing that, after a long day, it's good to take in that deep breath. So wonderful. So that's a taste of mindfulness. And we're going to explore in particular, let me jump back to let's see where I'm going here. I'm going to regroup for a moment because I had an issue with my slide there. So I'm sure you're seeing something different. Thank you guys for your patience. So I wanted to touch on the session overview and what we'll be learning today. We're going to be exploring resilience and its relationship to stress, and we're really going to be taking a look at some mindfulness-based perspectives and practices that foster resiliency. In specific, we'll be learning a practice called the stop practice. We'll also be learning how we can find rest and relaxation in the body, and then we'll learn how we can spark joy. It's interesting, but one of the things that happens when we're under stress is that our attention tends to narrow and focus on the problems that we're encountering. And when we tap into positive emotions like joy, we actually widen our attention, broaden our perspective, and it can be a very helpful way of working with the stress that we encounter. So I'll begin with just a definition of resilience, and I sort of think of it like a blade of grass. And there's a wonderful quote that kind of encapsulates this metaphor image of how a blade of grass might move when it's challenged by wind or rain or whatever the weather might be like. And it's a quote from a guy named Josh Waitzkin. That name might sound vaguely familiar. He was the subject of the book and the movie Finding Bobby Fischer. He was this brilliant chess prodigy and later became a martial arts master. And through those mastery of those things, he developed a style of learning and relating to experience. And this is what he writes. He says, life is full of random, unexpected events and demands. That's certainly been what we've encountered in the past year. And he says that it's vital we gain an understanding and awareness of our reactions to these intrusions so that we cultivate an ability to remain collected when they arise. It's helpful not to brace against these disruptions and the emotions they stir, but rather adopt a non-resistant attitude. And this allows us to absorb information, process it smoothly, and quickly take appropriate action so we can grow from the experience. We become resilient, like a flexible blade of grass. With a stiffened and strained approach to upheaval, we can't sustain focus or call upon our full wisdom, and we become brittle, a bit like a dry twig snapping under pressure. And I think one of the reasons why that quote resonates with me is it's imagistic, but it also touches upon some of the ways we can begin to relate to the circumstances in our lives, and maybe even some of the practices that we can adopt to help us ease our way into relating to the stress and challenges that we encounter, not only just in the past year, but in the entirety of our lives. And so resilience we can think of as really a process, a continuous process, and a practice of adapting well to adversity. And one of the fulcrums of resilience is this thing we call mindfulness, this thing that you experienced at the beginning of our session. And so what is mindfulness? Well, it's the awareness that arises when we pay attention with openness, balance, and non-reactivity. And every one of us is mindful. We have this capacity. How many of you have been at the beach and been really present with the warmth of the sun on your face or the sound of the ocean, or been in another natural setting and just really felt there, enveloped by the environment? So I see Venus nodding her head. You've maybe had that experience. Or how many of you have been really absorbed in a project at work, so much so that you've been concentrated and time just flew. Maybe a hobby like playing the guitar or singing or reading a book or actually engaged in a difficult project. Some of you probably experienced that too, right? How many of you have been really mad? Maybe you've been stuck in traffic and you're about to yell at someone who's cut you off, and then you stop. You feel the agitation in your body and you decide, I'm just not going to lay into someone. I'll just let that go. That's a little harder, but have you ever done that too? Yeah, probably. So all of those are facets of mindfulness. Mindfulness is really like this multifaceted jewel that allows us to have a lot of different capacities in our life. And another way we can think of mindfulness is really a training. It's a training in attentional skills. It's a little bit like going to the gym for our mind. And some of the skills we're training in are pretty specific. One of them is concentration, this ability to focus. It's also the ability to direct our attention, to choose to focus on what's relevant to us in any given moment. And that's meaningful when it comes to the cultivation of resiliency and stress. William James, who was this wonderful American philosopher, sort of the founder of modern psychology, said that the greatest weapon we have against stress is the ability to choose one thought over the other. So the ability to choose our thoughts, to engage with them or not, to let them go, has a big impact on how we relate to our stress. The other aspect of mindfulness is the development of clarity, this sensory clarity, the ability to know what we're thinking, feeling, sensing in any given moment. And that too is very helpful, both in terms of becoming more joyful in our lives and also managing our stress. Some months ago, it was before the pandemic, I went to Best Buy and I was mesmerized by their large screen TVs in the back of the room. The pictures they were displaying were so realistic, it felt like I could step into them. And they were showing pictures of, the Nepali coast, these beautiful settings in Hawaii. And so when we have this sensory clarity, it's a little bit like living life in high definition. Have you ever tasted a strawberry and really slowed down that experience so that you took in the color of the berry? You smelled the flavor and you bit into it and began to eat it. And there was just this burst of sweetness. If you had that sensory clarity, it's this ability to really know what's happening, to sense it. Everything we experience is a sensory event. The other component we're training in is this aspect of balance, having this ability not to be pushed or pulled by our experience or a strong emotion, but to be able to relate to it with a sense of gentle matter-of-factness. Doesn't mean we're indifferent, doesn't mean we don't feel it, but we're not subsumed by it. You might have noticed in that sitting that we did that maybe you had a discomfort arise, or maybe you had a difficult thought, fleeting as it was. And your ability to stay centered as that came and went is this quality of equanimity. And then we're also developing care, which is a natural outgrowth of all of these capacities. And it's important that we pay attention to different things, but how we pay attention is equally important. And what's interesting about all these skills is that throughout history, they've been highly correlated with greater fulfillment in life. If you go back to the ancient Greeks or the Stoics or on up to modern neuroscientists who are understanding how these practices actually affect us, they all relate to greater well-being. And we know through the research that mindfulness helps us not only relax the body, lower blood pressure, increase our focus, but also helps us regulate our emotion. It also tends to boost our sense of fulfillment and happiness. And so one of the ways that mindfulness comes into play in developing resiliency and how we relate to stress is that it helps us actually recognize when stress is happening. And then through some of the practices, we can learn to regulate ourselves so that we can actually respond rather than just be driven by the stress or react to it in ways that aren't wholesome for us. We can become responsive and choose from a range of things that might benefit us, whether that's taking a walk or taking a bath or actually practicing some mindfulness. And I think that one of the things it's important to understand is that not all stress is bad. Stress tends to get a bad rap, but it actually happens on a continuum. And some stress we might experience is invigorating. If we don't have any stress, we're not very motivated or engaged in our lives. Sometimes we can have a healthy amount of stress that actually challenges us. Many years ago, I got really taken with the Women's World Cup soccer tournament and a particular player named Carly Lloyd. She was having a marvelous tournament, and I saw some interviews with her in which she was asked how she related to the pressure, because some of the matches were going into overtime and extra penalty kicks, and her response really intrigued me. She said, "Oh, I love it. I can't wait to go into overtime. The pressure is what makes me perform." I think obviously she had some good sports psychologists, but also what she was exhibiting was this challenge response part of stress. It can be innovative, helpful to us. But of course, we also can go on to that curve of distress where we feel fatigued and exhausted. And if that goes on too long and we're not aware of it, it can become dis-ease. In fact, depending on the survey or statistics you read, as much as 75% or 95% of visits to doctors are stress related. So mindfulness grants us this capacity to actually notice what's happening in the moment and then take some actions to respond to it and to cultivate some more awareness around what's happening. And so I'll introduce you now to a practice that's called the stop practice. It's a wonderful practice to use in the midst of your day when you're experiencing stress. It's also a great practice just to practice when everything's going well, to connect with the moment and really enjoy and savor what you might be experiencing. So we'll do this practice kind of slowly, and then we'll do it kind of fast, and I'll give you some orientation around how we can experience this. So let's do this practice now, which, by the way, if I didn't explain, you can see it on the slide here. It's an acronym that stands for stop, take a breath, observe, and proceed. So that's what we're going to do now. We're going to stop. If we want, we can close our eyes and just take a full breath in. Like Karen was saying, it really helped her relax to do that. So take a full breath in. And now just observe what is happening. You might be feeling the movement of your breath in the body. Maybe you have a bit of mental chatter. Or maybe you notice some sounds in the room around you. We're just observing whatever is happening. And now we're opening our eyes and proceeding. We can also do this very quickly. We can stop and just take a breath. And just feel the weight of our body in the chair for a few moments. So what did you notice just doing that practice, both a little longer practice and now a shorter practice? And you can feel free to chat something in too if you'd like. And I can't have access to the chat for some reason, so maybe Venus, you can let me know if anyone's chatted anything in.
Oh, okay. Sorry about that. Let me see.
I think it's likely on my end.
Oh, okay. Karen said she needs to practice this more.
Yeah, wonderful. So yeah, that stopping, one of the hardest things about mindfulness is actually stopping and remembering to do it. And I'll tell you a couple things relative to this practice. There was once a army sergeant who had an anger management issue, and he was actually trained in some mindfulness-based practices, of which stop was one of them. And so he found himself in a grocery store checkout, and he was in the 12 items only checkout, but the woman ahead of him had more than 12 items. So he was getting upset about that. And then he noticed that the woman ahead of him had a baby and she was handing it to the cashier and they were oohing and eyeing over this baby. And he felt himself starting to get really angry. And he remembered, stop. So he did so. He took a breath. He noticed the rush of anger in his body, the heat in his chest, the clenching in his jaw, and he regulated himself. He sort of took a little bit broader perspective. And then he proceeded. And when he got up to the cashier, he managed to say to her, "Oh, that sure was a cute baby." And she lit up like a Christmas tree. She smiled. She said, "Oh, thank you. That's my baby. My husband was killed in Afghanistan last year, and my mother takes care of my baby now, and she brings him in every day so that I can be with her." So stopping can really be the difference, not only of how we are in this moment, but how we are in the next moment. And it can be the difference between being kind or being curt, being at ease or being tense, being agitated or being calm. Years ago, I also heard a story about the famed pianist Arthur Rubinstein, and he was kind of a master, and a journalist got a chance to interview him, but he was pretty frail at this point. So she knew she wouldn't have much time with him, and she decided to boil down her question just to one, which was, "Mr. Rubinstein, what makes your music so great?" And he said, "Oh, that's easy. I play the notes like everyone else. It's the pauses between the notes that make all the difference." So if we think of our life as a symphony, we might insert some pauses in between those high and low notes so that we can become more responsive in the next moment. And we can do this very practically. At work, we can stop when we sit in our chair and feel our body in the chair, like we did in that mindful check-in. We can take a breath in. I often do this when I'm driving. When I actually encounter a stop sign, I use it as a reminder, a very practical reminder to practice stop. And so those are some practical approaches of how you might use this. I'm curious if anyone has some ideas of how they might use it. And Venus, you can check in with the chat for me, but I'm curious in your workday how you might do a practice like stop.
I know I do when I don't agree with certain things. So I try to be practical and take a breath before I say anything or try to logically think through it.
Mm-hmm. Very
I don't like
helpful.
to, I don't like to affect anyone else. So I'm just trying to be like analytical about it.
Yeah, and
It's
some
hard
people,
though.
it's hard. Some people come by that naturally, and some people don't. It's taken me, I think about the length of my life. When I was younger, I had quite a temper. I don't anymore. I really have managed through the practice of mindfulness to have a different responsiveness to those
Mhm.
feelings that emerge inside me, and a lot of it comes through stopping and just taking a single breath. So this is a very handy practice you can use. I once taught it to a group of attorneys, and many of them said that they could use it in court, standing before they're about to give an argument or working through a brief. So there are many creative ways we can use this.
Jack said she needs to do this when dealing with her toddler.
Yeah, definitely.
I agree with that.
Parenting is an ongoing mindfulness practice. Yeah, can definitely use it in those situations. And
Yeah.
children are very provocative in delightful ways and in ways that really press us. So I work with kids and I teach them this practice so that they can learn to stop too. So it has lots of
Mhm.
uses, and I like Jack, that suggestion. Definitely something to incorporate in your parenting. And so I'll shift now to another practice around finding rest and relaxation. And I'll put this kind of in a cultural context. Rest gets a bad rap. We're a very hard charging society, and we've been that way for a long, long time. I mentioned William James earlier. He also wrote something in the 1800s called the Gospel of Relaxation. It's back in the 1800s, and he was lamenting how Americans were addicted to work And he described that they had this inner panting, this expectancy, and that they brought this breathless tension to their work. And I guess we haven't learned much because we're still kind of coping with this orientation toward productivity at the expense of rest. But rest is really a complement to our work. And it's in times when we rest that often we gain insight, become creative. So I just orient you around the cultural context in which this practice of rest can be leveraged to understand that it's actually conducive to helping us be productive. It's also conducive to helping us adapt well to adversity and helping us deal with those bouts of challenges where we have to maybe be more efforted or more active. If we can complement those periods with rest, it can help us stay within that spectrum on that stress curve that feels wholesome to us. And so we don't get too overextended. So before we begin this practice, I'll just start with a few sensitizing exercises. And this is just to help us really contact relaxation in the body and also have a bit of a novel discovery of where rest might exist in the body. So we're just going to do some gentle stretches that allow us to kind of unwind some of our stress in the body. And as we do these, just take care, we're going to be moving in a gentle range of motion, but if you have any injuries, just take care and move in a way that feels best to you. So we'll start just by dropping our neck down. And many of us now are seated at the computer, and so we might find that our neck is quite tense. And if you like, just gently turn the neck to one side, sort of doing a semicircle, bringing the neck to the other side. If you like, you can do a complete circle, but taking care just to be gentle in that range of motion. And as you do this, noticing the contact with any tension and the relaxation of it as you move through that range of motion, and then reversing the direction that you're moving the neck. And then bringing your neck to a standstill and rolling your shoulders up and forward and down. And again, just connecting with the sense of release, relaxation, and even the contact with tension as you do this. And then reversing that movement. We can even take our arm and bring it across the body and feel some stretching in the back of the shoulder blade and in the back of the rhomboids and trapezius, those muscles there. And then also, again, moving the arm across and feeling the release of tension as you stretch. Is this feeling good to people? Thumbs up if it is. Okay, one more. We're going to take our arms and cross them in front and then just bring them up, the elbows up to our face and then down. Bringing the elbows up and then down. And we'll reverse. I see Venus has the same watch I do, up and then down. Moving up and then down. Wonderful. And just, if you like, close your eyes and connect with the sensations that have bubbled up to the surface and just notice how you feel. Maybe a bit of letting go or release. Maybe you're more aware of the tension that's in your body. It's all good. Just notice what you notice. And so this is what relaxation might feel like. And you can open your eyes when you're ready. So one of the things that's valuable about doing that is to understand how responsive the body is and how easily we can create relaxation just through some mindful movement, mechanically moving our body in ways that release some of the stress that's been warehoused. We tend to think of stress as kind of overwhelming and monolithic. It certainly is that way, but it's also incremental. So a little intervention where we stretch, where we do a stop practice, can help unwind and intervene directly when stress is happening. We can also notice places in the body that are restful. We tend to really be attentive to the parts of the body that are agitated, and that's normal and natural. It's actually part of the stress response because the agitation actually is a call to action. But even in the midst of that, we might find areas of the body that feel okay, pretty restful, not a lot happening there. So we're going to do a little sensitizing exercise again, where we come in contact with places in the body that are just a little restful. So if you like, you can close your eyes for this as well. And I'll invite you just to notice your eyebrows, or the places where you think your eyebrows might be on your forehead. And you might just notice that there's not a lot of sensation there, not a lot happening, in which case we can consider that a place of rest. A little odd, but I'm also going to ask you to direct your attention to your earlobes and notice what you sense there. Maybe you just notice the place where you think your earlobes are because you can't feel anything really happening there. You might also shift your attention and notice what's happening underneath your armpits. Or behind the knees. So we can think of the body like a landscape, a topography with highs and lows, areas of activity and areas where there's some rest. And that's helpful to know, because if we can connect with these places of rest in the body, we can manage some of the agitation that might simultaneously be happening, or just to find a little refuge in the midst of some busyness. So go ahead and open your eyes. And what was that like? Were you able to connect with those small little places where there wasn't maybe a lot of activity relative to other places in the body? Did you notice that? You can give me a thumbs up if you were able to find that. Or maybe it was subtle. Maybe it was hard to notice. Okay. So we're going to wrap this together now in a guided practice where we come in contact with rest and relaxation in the body. And this can be very helpful to do before bed if you need to kind of ease your way into sleep, or in the middle of the day when you feel a lot of fatigue or a lot of agitation where you just need a break. So I'll invite you to close your eyes if you're comfortable doing that. And you can always leave them open. That's an option. And again, find that posture that you used in that mindful check-in where your body's upright but not uptight. And your hands can be held softly in your lap. And again, just feel the weight of the body and the force of gravity acting on the body, holding you in place. And I'll invite you to direct your attention to different places in the body where we can intentionally maybe soften and release some tension. So just notice the muscles around your eyes. And if you feel gripping here, just soften the eyes. Let them float like buoys in an ocean. Allow the face to relax, smooth the surface of the face. An imagery might help. You can think of syrup being poured onto pancakes, that sense of letting the stress pour out of your face. You can also drop your shoulders and maybe just even notice that on each exhalation, the shoulders fall just a little bit. And as they drop, just soften, loosen the arms along the sides of your body, like curtains hanging or draping from a rod. And soften your belly. Allow your breath to move freely in your body. And we can also use our attention to notice or find those spots in the body that are restful. So maybe directing your attention to your eyebrows or to the back of your knees. Another place where rest naturally happens in the body is on the exhalation of the breath. As we breathe in, we contract the muscles to take in the breath. And as we exhale, the body relaxes to prepare for the next exhalation. If you like, you can just rest your attention on that exhalation. If it's helpful, you can apply just a gentle mental label of rest. Each time you contact that exhalation or the overall sense of your body relaxing. So that can become a positive mental mantra. Just rest, rest, rest. If thoughts arise or images, just let those fade into the background. As in the foreground, you stay with the sensations of rest in the body. Rest can be subtle. So if it's not present, you can just stay with that exhalation. Wonderful. When you're ready, go ahead and open your eyes. And so, also wondering how that practice went. Were you able to contact rest? Did you notice that there was a bit of a settling? Maybe you had some agitation. That, by the way, is normal. Sometimes when we seek to cultivate a particular state, the opposite can arise. And that's almost a way of releasing some of the tension that might have been warehoused in the body throughout the day. And we can just notice that. Sometimes we might have to actually attend to just the breath as a way of simplifying things. But what did you notice, Venus?
I have to like calm my mind. My mind will start racing again. So then I have to focus on just letting things be.
Mm-hmm.
And I could do it for a while and then it comes back. So I have to keep practicing.
Yeah, and this is a practice. That word that I focused on in that definition of resiliency, that it's a process and a practice of
Mhm.
continuously adapting to adversity. And the rhythm of a mindfulness practice is like that. We have periods where there's activity and ease, activity and ease. And then as we practice that easeful period becomes longer. But more important than that is the way we cultivate the relationship to those states changes. We don't become as agitated with the fact that our mind is busy. It's just busy. And that ties into
Yeah.
the skill that we're learning of equanimity. So
Karen said she also has a racing mind and carries a lot of tension in her shoulders. So
yeah,
paying attention to that helped.
yeah. And just to normalize that racing mind, when we meditate, we will have thoughts.
Mhm.
It's a total misnomer that we won't have any thoughts happening. It's a neurological impossibility. The mouth
Mhm.
waters, the eyes blink, the mind thinks. And so, really, over time, what changes is our relationship to all of that. We're not so engrossed or entangled in the thinking, and the duration and intensity and the amount of time we are engaged in that way tends to dissipate. So, rest can be a way that we can find some ease in the body, but it might also make us more aware of the places where we're agitated. And that's okay. As I said, awareness doesn't discriminate, and it's all welcome because it cultivates this understanding of how we are in this moment. And based on that understanding, we can respond with kindness
So
and wisdom.
my question is, the more we practice, does it get easier to let that go, the racing thoughts?
Yes. Yeah. It gets easier and easier. And that's really when we do a concentration practice where we're focusing, say, on rest or the breath. One of the skills we're learning is how to let go of the thoughts. The thoughts will come, we get entangled with them, then we let them go, we come back to the breath. Images will come, we get entangled with them, we let them go, and we come back to the breath. And that skill is very transferable in our daily life because it's the same skill we want to use when we find we're worrying or when we're ruminating or thinking about something in the past that we are rehashing, you know. So that is really the training, and it's a little bit like when we meditate, we're kind of lifting a dumbbell, and strengthening that muscle. And just as we would go to the gym, so we get fit and we can climb a flight of stairs very easily or run across the street, that transference of the fitness shows up in our daily life. So the practice of this shows up in our daily life, and you might notice the more you practice it that, oh, I'm just not getting upset about that anymore. Or, I have a worry, but I notice I'm not spending as much time worrying. And sometimes um, the change can be subtle until one day we notice, oh, I just don't do that anymore. So it can be this process of gentle unfolding. And it's a wonderful thing when that happens. And we can still have sits that are agitating. That's part of it. So thanks for asking those questions. It really makes the session robust and interesting. And we'll shift now to one last practice, which is about sparking joy. And I love this picture, by the way, of this little boy, because he really is quite joyous. And as I mentioned at the top of our program, one of the reasons why we want to engage in cultivating positive emotions is that they really help balance some of our focus on the problems. When we're stressed, we tend to be very fixated on what's wrong. And so it's very helpful to get in touch with the joy that we have the capacity to experience. And so we'll do this in a playful way. I'm going to read you some things and I'm going to show you a video. And I'm also going to orient you to pay attention in a certain way to your body. We can feel emotions in the body. That's why they're called feelings. They have a somatic imprint. And we can feel emotions everywhere in the body, but often we feel them in the midline of the body. One of the reasons is because we have a large nerve called the vagus nerve that moves through the brain into the heart and down into the belly. And that's a kind of a central corridor for communication throughout the body and the nervous system. So we can, for example, feel a lot of anxiety in the chest, but we can also feel some rosiness and some warmth and lightness when we feel joy. So just to keep a little light touch on the body as we go through these experiences together and notice what might be arising in the body and even what's happening on the face, okay? So I'm going to read you some things from a really delightful Twitter feed called Thoughts from a Dog. So these are the thoughts from this lovely gentleman who does this Twitter feed. It's the thoughts from his dog. So his dog thinks, the human has to go to work again this week, but that's okay. There's a Skittle under the fridge that needs my constant surveillance. Sometimes my tongue pokes out when I sleep. I'm aware of this because the human takes pictures of it every time and shows it to me when I wake up. The human just learned that they'll be working from home for the foreseeable future. This is simply a formality. I was never going to let them go back anyway. Is now an okay time to tell you I love you? So just pay attention to the lightness of this exchange, this imagined exchange of a dog to a human. And notice what that was like. And because all of us aren't dog lovers, I'm going to show you a video now. And I'll share my screen with you. A different screen. Okay, can people see this coming onto view? It should be
Yes.
kind of the image. Okay, I'll make it a full screen now. And let me make sure that I shared the sound in this. Can you guys hear that?
Yes.
Okay, wonderful.
Enough, but he's not afraid by extremism. And Qatar is the only one who decides if we do it. 6 years ago, I wanted a cat. I went to a shelter. Once there, the cat came to me and never let go of me. He had left with cattle. Before, she was abandoned by other people, so she considered me his mother. At the beginning, I went outside with cattle in my farm to make her feel safe with me. We were very close right away. Kata became very sociable and always wanted to share the moment with me at work, at home. I felt guilty for being able to offer Kata only an apartment life. So since since I bike a lot, I wanted to try to share it with her. We left at night so as not to scare Katot with the cars. This was the first activity I tried to do with Katot, and she liked it for sure. So we continue to try other activities. I see that Katot is happy when she takes her head out to catch the wind. He's very curious and loves speed, but there is always a small leash to prevent Katot from advancing too much. She is too fearless. It's sure everybody who has a cat knows that. You don't make a cat do what she doesn't want to do. It's not possible. We always do short activities, 1 hour maximum. On a motorcycle, there is a lot of wind, and Katot takes her head out a lot. So I wanted to protect her eyes. I'm an engineer and PhD in science. I always do things to simplify my and Katot life. So I made a helmet with glasses. I made the mold of Katot head with paper, redesigned the helmet by computer, and then printed the figuration. The greatest reward is to see Katot, an abandoned cat, enjoying life every day. When Katot is happy, I'm happy. She did everything for me. I can count on her more than any human. I was a little alone in my long studies. Yes, I have family. Yes, I have friends, but it's not the same. Katot is always a support for me. Katot has confidence in me. She feels safe with me. Nobody has stayed with me for 6 years in good and bad. Katot did.
Grammarly does more than catch errors.
Let's see if I can
With
stop
Grammarly,
that.
you can find really good, no, perfect words that make your writing sharp, or explicit, or excellent, or distinctive.
Okay.
Super cute.
Thanks for some of those technical difficulties. So yeah, what did you notice as you watched that video? What feelings did you come in contact with? So Jack saying so cute, and Karen really enjoying that video, saying it was awesome. Maybe Denise has something to share too. And you might have noticed how that enlivened you. You know, maybe you felt that very viscerally. And so we can access joy in this mindful way. We can actually savor it. Now, I mentioned the stop practice is, of course, good when we're overwhelmed, but it's also good to really stop and take in the good. You know, many years ago, I was with my husband. We were in a restaurant. They had windows that opened up onto the street, and there was, it was a very, very hot day. And out of nowhere came this delightful breeze. And we were mid-conversation. I just put my hand on his forearm. I said, oh, just wait a minute. I'm just going to stop and really feel this breeze. And it was this delicious kind of sweet uplift that I felt. It was sensorial. It was, you know, something that you could have let go very quickly, you know, not even bothered with, because a breeze is pretty quick. But that was a stop practice being used to take in a bit of good. And so one of the ways we can orient ourselves mindfully is not only to the regulation of stress and to the awareness of it, but also to the awareness of what's good and to feeling it in the moment. So when you watch that video, really noticing, you know, the feelings of joy emerging. And I'm curious, how might you do that in your daily life? Take in the good. There are many small good moments that we don't attend to, and our attention naturally is more oriented to the problems we have. That's kind of hardwired. We have a negativity bias. But there are many small good moments that we could attend to. What might be some of them? And feel free to chat some in.
I'll pitch in.
Yeah,
I know with my kids, I'm trying to enjoy more the moments, especially now that we've been home for a while. Because I know eventually we'll be going back to work regularly. So I'm trying to enjoy these little moments that I have with them and and the hugs and the laughs and stuff like that.
Wonderful. It's an intention on how to use your attention when you're with them. And also, I like how you put this in context that, this is kind of a time that's rarefied, that you won't have the same way. And so that sense of savoring this time with them. And that's a wonderful reframing, by the way, of the burdens of the pandemic. That the pandemic has brought us closer in ways that can be stressful, but it's also brought us closer in ways that are really sweet. So I appreciate that. And then, just this great touching in, Karen, on enjoying the outdoors, and appreciating the beauty, particularly on a day like today where we had this contrast of the rain and then the sun emerging from the clouds, and just how striking the beauty is here. I've been in California many, many years, and I moved out here from Virginia, Northern Virginia. And one thing that was really striking to me was how jarring the beauty was in California. I mean, Virginia's lovely. It has gentle rolling hills and it's beautiful, but it's not as jarring and as striking. And sometimes the beauty here is overwhelming. You have to really stop and take it in. And so I love that, the ability to appreciate the outdoors and the ability to really recognize the gift of the weather here, the gift of now spring coming and the beautiful colors of some of the flowers. So we can really stop for that and savor it. And that helps us really build this foundation of well-being. So I'll just review some of the things that we learned this evening. I really appreciate everyone being here. I appreciate the people who will be watching it on recording. Some of the things we learned is that we can develop this capacity to be resilient and consider resiliency this ongoing process. You never really land. You're always engaging and adapting to adversity. And I think that's a helpful way to think about stress, that stress is never going to go away. We don't have to fear it, and it's not all bad. But we do need to develop some skills that make us more adaptable. And one of the fulcrums of being more resilient and adaptable is mindfulness, because it grants us this capacity to really recognize when stress is happening, regulate and respond in the midst of it. And we learn some specific practices to do that. We learn the stop practice, which can help us really begin to understand what's happening in any given moment. And if it's stressful, help to regulate it. We also learn that we can find rest and relaxation in the body, some mindful movement, doing some shoulder rolls, doing some stretching can be very helpful to unwind the compounded effect of stress in the body. And then also shifting and really noticing where relaxation or rest might exist throughout the body, if that's available to us. It might not be, but if it's available, then we can always maybe attend to the exhalation where that's really prominent. And then lastly, shifting in to really include in our awareness the things that are joyous in our lives as a way not only of balancing the stress we feel, but of just creating greater fulfillment, and using the stop practice to take in the good as well. And also using external resources like fun videos or a good book or even television shows that uplift us. So I'll share my screen one more time to show you some resources if you're interested in practicing. So I don't think we introduced myself, but I teach for UCLA's Mindful Awareness Research Center. My name's Kelly Barron. And so you can go on UCLA's site and you can download free guided meditations. They're wonderful. You can also attend talks that are held at the Hammer. I think they're now being done remotely. And so that can deepen your understanding of mindfulness if that interests you. You can also use an app called Insight Timer. I believe it's free. It used to be free. They might have had a small fee associated with it now. But what I like about that app is that there are lots and lots of different teachers offering mindfulness practices, guided practices in all sorts of ways. So you have a range of people that you can learn from there. I also teach for a company called eMindful. That's a wonderful platform for online learning. It does have a fee, but you can explore that. And if that interests you, that's another great way to support the development of a mindfulness practice. I teach privately. I coach one-on-one. I also have classes. You can go on my website and just explore there. There are other resources there as well. And then I would recommend a couple of books. One is called The Upside of Stress by Kelly Mcgonagall, who's a Stanford professor. And this is a really helpful book to help you reframe the way you think of stress and also learn some practices to navigate through it with greater resiliency. And then if you're interested in mindfulness, there's a great book by Diana Winston, who's the director of education at UCLA's Mindful Awareness Research Center, and that book's called Fully Present. And I think that gives you a good overview of mindfulness practice, so you can learn through those resources. And I'm glad that you were here tonight to get a taste of mindfulness, and hopefully, this was an uplifting program for you and maybe just gave you some motivation to explore mindfulness more deeply and to understand the practicality of it and how it can be meaningful to you in your life. So I appreciate the opportunity to be here. Thanks so much, Venus, for inviting me. And I appreciate Karen and Denise and Jack, who also attended. And I'm sure there'll be many more people who watch this online as well.
Thank you so much, Kelly. I appreciate it. This was great.
Yeah. Thank you, everyone. Take care and be well.
Thank you. You too.